This video was requested by a patron. Top-tier patrons get early access to videos and the ability to request future video topics we need to cover. See how you can become a patron by clicking the link in the description below. And now, on with our feature presentation. This player right here is none other than the legendary Dallas Cowboys defensive end, Ed Too Tall Jones. He was chosen first overall by the Dallas Cowboys in the 1974 NFL Draft. And to say that the pick was a massive success would be an understatement, as the 6'9" defensive end was one of the greatest players in team history and an anchor on the vaunted Doomsday defense. In 15 seasons with the Cowboys, he started 203 games, including every single game from 1980 to 88 minus one straight game, made it to 3 straight Pro Bowls from 1981 to 83, won Super Bowl 12, and finished his career third in Cowboys history in sacks, only behind Harvey Martin and Randy White. He was named an AP First Team All-Pro in 1982, was named an AP Second Team All-Pro twice, and had at least 6 sacks in 12 different seasons, which is remarkably consistent production. For some perspective, J.J. Watt did this 6 times, Michael Strahan did this 9 times, and that's more than DeMarcus Ware, the greatest pass rusher in Cowboys history, had for his career. Bottom line, Jones was a great player, and during his peak, was one of the most feared players at his position in the entire NFL. I've talked before about just how good Jones was, and how important he was for the Cowboys. So if you want to learn more about Jones and his amazing career in the NFL, you can do so by clicking the card in the upper right corner. This player right here, this is not Ed Too Tall Jones. This is Philadelphia Eagles defensive end Jon Harris, and he's very similar to Jones in a lot of ways. They both played defensive end for NFC East teams. They're both first-round picks. They both breathe oxygen and eat to sleep. They were both born on Earth. They both went to college. Someone gave birth to them. Say they've got a ton in common. And you know who else thought the two men were identical? Philadelphia Eagles head coach Ray Rhodes, who decided, for some reason, to put some extra pressure on his first-round draft pick after taking him by deciding to compare him to one of the greatest defenders in the history of the Dallas Cowboys organization, which, spoiler alert, did not work out at all. Not at all. Because this is the story behind what has to be, without a doubt, the worst NFL draft comparison in the history of the Philadelphia Eagles franchise. Before I talk about the actual comparison made by Rhodes that is downright laughable and still lives on in infamy more than a quarter century later, we need some context to understand just why the Eagles even wanted to draft the man that you've been watching this whole time in the first place. The good news for the Eagles entering the 1997 season was that they had been relatively successful thus far under the guidance of head coach Ray Rhodes, who in each of his first 2 seasons led Philly to back-to-back 10-6 records, and even led them to a playoff win in 1995 over the Detroit Lions, which was their first home playoff win in a decade and a half. To learn more about that win, click the card in the upper right corner. The bad news was that despite being a good team, as evidenced by their back-to-back playoff appearances, their pass rush was in some kind of trouble. Now on the surface, it might not seem that way. In 1996, the Eagles had 40 sacks, which was 8th in the league out of 30 teams. So on paper, that seems like quite the exaggeration. Well, 13 of those sacks came from William Fuller, who now found himself on the San Diego Chargers. So when you take him out, you're left with just 3 players on the team who had at least 3 sacks in 1996 who would be returning in 1997. And no, signing a 37-year-old Richard Dent who had 8.5 sacks in the last 3 years combined, shocker, would not be the answer to this newfound problem. So it was clear that the Eagles needed to do something to improve the pass rush, and replace the production that Fuller had provided for the team throughout the mid-1990s. And that's where they turned to Jon Harris, a defensive end out of Virginia. Normally, I would show the highlights here of Harris during his time at Virginia, but he didn't exactly do a lot there, as in his 4 years there, Despite being a pass-rushing defensive end, he had 15 sacks. That was it. Granted, according to Eagles head coach Ray Rhodes, the reason was because he was more of a system player, where his job was to free up the linebackers, who were James Farrior and Jamie Sharper, to make the plays, with Rhodes saying he was a system player. He did what they asked him to do. He got a lot of heat on the quarterback, and he broke the pocket down quite a bit. And don't get me wrong, that's still a decent amount of sacks, as it's inside the top 15 in school history, and at the time of his graduation after the 1996 season, ranked inside the top 10. But you're looking at a guy that did not pop out off the screen, and never got any All-ACC accolades to speak of on the field, only receiving honorable mention honors in 1995 and 1996. In other words, just based on the production in college, you would never in a million years expect this man to go in the first round. To even suggest otherwise would be ludicrous, especially after having 12 solo tackles and 3 sacks as a senior. Heck, the idea of him going in round 1 seems so ridiculous on the surface that during the 1997 NFL Draft, despite having film for every other prospect ready to go, ESPN had absolutely nothing. They just had that still image of Harris. That was it. And looking at the mock drafts, no one, and I truly mean no one, had him going in the first round. Especially since it's not even like he was an NFL Combine warrior, because he had a hamstring injury and couldn't do a ton of the drills. If Virginia was going to have 2 first-round picks in 1997 for the first time in school history, it was going to be with their linebackers, Farrior and Sharper. It was not going to be with Jon Harris. Here are 2 mock drafts from a newspaper in New York. Neither of them had Jon Harris on there. Here's a mock draft from the Miami Herald. Once again, no Jon Harris anywhere to be found. The legendary John Clayton put out a mock draft on the weekend of the draft, and did not have Jon Harris anywhere near the first round. In fact, I found this article looking at what the Baltimore Ravens needed heading into the 1997 NFL Draft, and they said that they would consider taking Harris at defensive end in the 3rd round. A first-round pick? No way, no how. It was not going to happen, especially since the NFL gave out forms to everywhere at the draft to keep track of who got chosen. On that form, 39 defensive linemen were listed. That's quite a lot. Jon Harris was not one of them. Another guide had him as the 23rd best defensive lineman in the draft. Not the 23rd best player, the 23rd best defensive lineman. And another draft guide had him as a 5th round pick. Yet with pick number 25 in the first round, the Eagles decided to take a chance and decided to outsmart everyone by taking the Virginia defensive end. No one saw this coming, including the 6'7", 280-pound defensive end himself, who said, "That was a big surprise to me." Always a good sign when the player in question was expecting to go by the end of round 2, but maybe wouldn't hear his name called by the end of the 3 rounds today. And yet, here he is, going in round 1. It was always a head-scratching decision, no matter how you wanted to slice it. It was always going to be a bizarre choice that was going to get panned and flamed by everyone, especially since the teammate of his that was making the plays, Jamie Sharper, was still not chosen by this point. But now, it was time for this man right here, Ray Rhodes, to justify the pick. Justify just why he chose a guy that no one outside of you had a first-round grade on, and justify choosing a man that was so out of left field that one Pennsylvania newspaper had to put out an article letting people know that Jon Harris was a real person and wasn't some sort of fever dream that they hallucinated. Well, after Rhodes decided to bash anyone and everyone who criticized the pick, saying on ESPN's Tom Jackson in his criticism, "Tom Jackson doesn't coach this football team, he doesn't evaluate talent for us," he decided to double down, triple down, quadruple down, and do everything else under the sun, and compared him to the man talked about at the top of the video. None other than Ed Too Tall Jones. the man who had 1 year of starting experience in college and mustered up 12 tackles that year, was being compared to a player on a rival team who started over 200 games and recorded over 100 sacks, and at his peak, was more feared than just about every pass rusher in football. Because that makes complete sense. Said Rhodes, "This guy is a young Too Tall Jones. I've always wanted a big, tall, young, long-arm, massive defensive end." That's right, folks. Jon Harris was a younger version of Too Tall Jones. There were many, and I truly mean many flaws with that. Number one, Too Tall Jones was 6'9". Jon Harris was 2 inches smaller than that. Not saying he wasn't tall, but 6'7" defensive ends weren't entirely out of the ordinary, as there have been quite a few. Too Tall was the tallest defensive end in NFL history. That's like if in the NBA, when the Oklahoma City Thunder drafted Chet Holmgren, they said that he's a young Manute Bol because of how tall he is. You get why the logic in the comparison doesn't make any sense, right? Number two, why are you putting the pressure on this kid? What purpose does that serve? You should not be comparing him to another player who turned out to be one of the best and most consistent pass rushers in NFL history, let alone a player on a rival team. Imagine if, after the Chicago Bears drafted Justin Fields, they said that he's the next Brett Favre or Aaron Rodgers. Ignore the fact that the comparison, based on their playstyle, makes no sense at all. You're going to compare a guy to a guy on a rival team that torched you for years? I'm sure that'll go over really well with your fan base and your organization. And we're just going to ignore the fact that the entire press conference that Rhodes had was either proclaiming this guy to be the next Too Tall Jones or bashing the press for doubting him, and saying nothing about why he was the pick other than the fact that he's tall. You do realize that Too Tall Jones actually produced in college, right? You do realize that to get drafted, he had 38 sacks, helped win 2 Black College Football National Championships, and was named an All-American twice, right? He didn't have 3 sacks his final season, start 1 year, and receive no accolades. Even if we take out the fact that putting pressure on Harris by comparing him to someone of Jones's nature is stupid, this comparison just doesn't work no matter what level you base it on. Height, production, play style? There was nothing about Jones that was even remotely comparable to Harris. It makes about as much sense as me comparing Peyton Manning coming out of college to Doug Flutie. Which raises the ultimate question. How on earth would Harris perform? Could he live up to the expectations as the next Too Tall Jones? Well, considering the fact that Jones had 106 sacks, and Harris only finished a very close 104 sacks behind him, I'm going to say that no, he could not. If you speak of the biggest bust in the history of the Eagles franchise, it is awfully tough to say anyone else besides Harris, considering that he played 2 seasons during some of the darkest years of franchise history and recorded 2 sacks, recording 1 sack in 1997 and 1 sack in 1998. Jones had 3 games where he recorded more sacks than Harris recorded throughout his entire career, which gives you an idea of just how laughable this was in hindsight. As writer Marcus Hayes said 1 year after the pick, they drafted Jon Harris in 1997 and said he had the potential to be the next Ed Too Tall Jones. Harris is about as far from the Hall of Fame as you can be and still be in the league. Another writer said, hailed as another Too Tall Jones by Coach Ray Rhodes, Harris wasn't even as good as Jones's shadow. And yeah, seeing as he was off the Eagles by the end of the 1999 preseason and never played another regular season game after 1998, I can't really argue with that. Maybe Harris was as good as Too Tall Jones if Jones was still playing in 1997 when he was in his late 40s. But that's about the only way this comparison makes any sense whatsoever. You would think that coaches and general managers will realize this by now. But do not, under any circumstances, compare a player who has yet to play a snap in the NFL to a really good, established veteran who's a franchise legend that you can only dream he becomes. It makes you look stupid. It puts you in a no-win situation, and it puts unnecessary pressure on the player that you didn't need to put on them. And it's safe to say that in 1997, the Eagles did not get the memo, and they found this one out the hard way. Because on the field, Jon Harris played more like too small. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.